Dawn doesn't arrive in the city. It just thins the darkness, like watered-down whiskey. The rain was still falling when I reached my office. Steady, patient, the kind that doesn't ask permission. I peeled off my coat, and the room filled with the smell of harbor rust and wet paper. I laid the photograph on my desk. Eddie Rourke, younger and grinning, arm around my shoulder like he owned my future. I'd buried that smile years ago. Now it was back, staring up at me like it had never learned to blink. The note was worse. 3 lines of truth, and each one felt like a fingernail under the skin. You never asked who paid for the fire. You never asked who ordered you to look away. You trusted the wrong badge. I tried to convince myself it was a trick, ink and old memories, a cheap ghost story. But my scar pulled when I frowned, and my scar doesn't believe in fiction. I did what I always do when the city tries to rewrite my past. I went looking for paper. Paper doesn't lie. People do. If Eddie had been near the docks the night of the fire, there would be a trail. Somewhere. A signature. A stamp. A ledger entry that someone forgot to burn. The Port Authority kept records in a building that looked like a courthouse married a bunker. No windows at street level. Thick doors. The kind of place built to keep the public out and the truth in. I went there in the late morning, when the rain was a gray curtain and the sidewalk smelled like wet stone. Inside, the air was dry and stale, like old files and older secrets. A clerk behind a counter watched me the way you watch a stray dog, curious, cautious, ready to call security. "Records," I said, flashing my badge. Her eyes dipped to it. A flicker of recognition, then something colder. Respect isn't the same as trust in this town. She led me down a hallway where fluorescent lights hummed like insects. The archive room was a cage of metal shelves and locked cabinets. File boxes stacked like tombstones. The clerk handed me a visitor form and a pencil that looked like it had confessed to 100 men before me. "Need a reference number," she said. I slid a folded bill across the counter with my name. The pencil didn't blink. Neither did she. She simply nodded, as if cash was another kind of paperwork. I started with the dock fire. Date, location, incident report. The file was there, thin and clean. Too clean. Electrical fault. Accelerant traces inconclusive. 1 fatality, unidentified. My signature sat at the bottom like a bruise. I hated that signature. It was the handwriting of a man who still believed the system could be trusted if you followed the rules hard enough. I dug deeper. Cargo manifests, security logs, maintenance requests, anything that put bodies and names in the same place. Hours passed. The room stayed cold. The lights stayed cruel. Then I found it. A ledger entry with the Port Authority crest. A payment authorization, routine, buried among dock repairs and overtime slips. But the vendor name didn't belong. Blackwater Salvage Services. Nobody in the department had ever mentioned them. Nobody in the newspapers. Yet here they were, paid the week after the fire for cleanup and recovery. Recovery of what? A page number in the margin pointed to an attachment. I opened the cabinet again, looked for the file, and froze. The slot was empty. Behind me, a soft click. Not the cabinet, the door. I didn't turn right away. Turning fast is how you give a man power. I listened instead, counted breaths, measured silence. Footsteps, slow, careful. Not the clerk. Her shoes had squeaked on the tile. These didn't. I slid the ledger under my arm and stood like I belonged there. When I faced the room, a man was leaning against the doorway, hands in his coat pockets, smile thin as wire. He wore a suit the color of cigarette ash, hair slicked back, eyes bright and empty. The kind of eyes that never lose sleep because they've outsourced guilt. "You're making a mess," he said. "I'm reading," I answered. "You're reading the wrong things. In this city," I said, "the right things get you killed." He chuckled softly, like he'd heard that line before and watched it fail. "You always had a taste for drama, Billy." Hearing my name from his mouth was like tasting metal. "Who are you?" "Someone who keeps the Port Authority from drowning in its own paperwork." He stepped into the room, and the fluorescent lights did him no favors. The skin under his eyes was too smooth, like he'd never been honest long enough to wrinkle. "Where's the attachment?" I asked. He tilted his head. "What attachment?" "The missing file," I said. "The page the ledger points to. The one someone walked off with." His smile widened by a millimeter. "Maybe it was destroyed. Fires do that." "Yeah," I said. "Fires do a lot." He moved closer, slow, the way men do when they think the distance belongs to them. "You're chasing a story that's been paid to stay quiet." "Paid by who?" He shrugged. "Does it matter? Money doesn't have a face. It has hands, and hands reach everywhere." I tightened my grip on the ledger. Eddie Rourke. The name changed the room. The man's eyes didn't widen, but something in his posture shifted, like a lock turning. "That's a dead name," he said. "Then why is his handwriting on a note in my coat?" I said. "Why is his face in a photograph that someone soaked and left for me like a gift?" He stared at me for a long second, and the silence between us filled with all the things men don't say out loud. "You loved him," he said finally, voice low, "as much as a cop can love another cop." I didn't answer. In my line of work, confession is a weapon someone else uses. He took a step back and nodded toward the ledger. "Put that away." "No." He sighed, the performance of patience. "You don't understand what you're stepping into." "I understand enough," I said. "Someone paid for cleanup after the dock fire. Someone paid to make a body disappear. Someone paid to turn my signature into an ending." The man's smile vanished. "Your signature was a service. The city appreciates men who know when to stop asking." He pulled his hand from his pocket. For a second, I saw the glint of something small, keys maybe, or a badge. It was gone before the light could confirm it. "Walk out," he said. "Forget what you saw. You'll keep your lungs and your license." I shook my head. "Not today." That's when I heard it. Another sound beyond the records room. A second set of footsteps, faint, somewhere down the hall. Not the clerk, somebody else. Quiet, patient. Two men, maybe three. The trap had layers. The man in the ash suit sensed my attention shift. His voice sharpened. Do not look away. That was the mistake. A man who tells you where to look is terrified of what you'll see elsewhere. I moved, not fast, not dramatic, just a half step to the side, letting the metal shelf block his line. The first gunshot cracked through the archives like thunder trapped indoors. Paper exploded. Dust rained down like gray snow. The city had found me again, and it was collecting interest. I hit the floor as the second shot followed, chewing the edge of a cabinet. The ash suit man didn't flinch. He'd known the shots were coming. That's the difference between prey and management. I crawled behind a row of shelves, the ledger pressed to my chest. Bullets snapped through paper and metal with a sound like angry insects. Somewhere outside the room, someone shouted. Somewhere closer, someone laughed. I wasn't armed, not officially. I needed distance. I needed an exit. The emergency map showed a service stairwell at the far end of the hall. I waited for the rhythm. Shot, pause, footstep. Then moved when the city blinked. I ran low, breath held. At the stairwell door, I pushed, and it didn't budge. Locked. I slammed my shoulder into it twice. The latch gave up with a bark of metal. I tumbled into the stairwell and took the steps two at a time, the ledger banging against my ribs. Above me, feet pounded. Below me, a door opened and a voice called my name. They knew me. That meant this wasn't security. This was personal. In the basement, I found a maintenance corridor and a loading bay door cracked open to the alley behind the building. Rain hit me like a slap. I welcomed it. Rain makes everything harder to see. A man stepped into the doorway, scanning the alley. His gaze stopped on a puddle near the curb. A fresh ripple. I grabbed a broken brick and threw it hard across the alley. It clattered against a dumpster, loud and ugly. The man's head snapped toward it. He moved that way. I moved the other way. 2 blocks later, I ducked under an awning and opened the ledger with shaking hands. The entry was still there. Blackwater Salvage Services, cleanup and recovery, paid the week after the dock fire. In the margin beside it, someone had penciled 2 letters and a number, faint enough to miss unless you were desperate. P17. Pier 17. My phone vibrated. Private number, no caller ID. I answered. A breath on the line, then a voice, low and controlled, like it was wrapped in gloves. You're late, Billy. My spine went cold. Eddie? A small exhale. Don't say my name on the phone. Where are you? Alive, he said, and not alive enough. Who's after me? The same men who paid for the fire, he said. The same men who bought your signature. The same men who just turned records into confetti. Why now? Because you opened the box, Eddie said. Because you're predictable. What do you want? Go to Pier 17, he said. Tonight, 1 hour before midnight. Come alone. The last time I went alone, someone tried to bury me. This time, he said, voice turning colder. "If you don't come, you'll never see the real file. The one that proves whose badge was dirty first." The line went dead. Rain kept falling. It always does. And somewhere under that rain, the city started moving pieces again. Pier 17 was a ribcage of rotten wood and salt-stained iron. The kind of place the city keeps for things it doesn't want seen in daylight. The fog rolled in off the water like smoke from a giant cigarette, thick enough to hide a confession, thin enough to show you the outlines of trouble. I got there an hour before midnight, like Eddie said. The rain had slowed, but the pier was slick anyway. Everything in this town is slippery when you're trying to stand on principle. A single light burned at the end of the dock, yellow and weak. It made the fog glow like old bruises. I walked toward it, hands empty, head up, nerves quiet. Fear is loud. I needed silence. Halfway down, I heard the creak of wood behind me. I didn't turn. I watched the water instead. The black surface shifted, and in it I saw a shadow break away from the fog, tall, moving slow, like it had all night. "You came," a voice said. Not Eddie's, younger, rougher. A man stepped into the light, long coat, hood up, face half hidden. He held a small waterproof case in one hand, like he didn't care how obvious it was. "Eddie sent you?" I asked. The man nodded once. "He said you'd have a scar and a bad attitude. Then he remembers me." The man tossed the case at my feet. It hit the boards with a dull thud. "That's for you. Don't open it here." "Where is he?" The man's eyes flicked toward the fog. "Everywhere. Nowhere." That answer had teeth. I bent to pick up the case, and the boards beneath me groaned. The pier complained like an old witness forced to testify. When I straightened, the hooded man was already backing away. "Wait," I said. "Tell him—" A sound cut me off. A soft, metallic click carried over water. Not a door this time, a safety. The hooded man froze, his head turned, listening. Then his body moved, fast, panicked, toward the shadows. He didn't make it. The shot came from the fog, clean and professional. The man jerked, stumbled, and fell hard. The hood slipped back, and I saw his face for a heartbeat. Too young to be this dead, eyes wide like he'd just met the city for the first time. He hit the boards and didn't get up. The fog shifted again, and a silhouette stepped into the edge of the light. Ash-colored suit, calm posture, that same thin smile. "You keep showing up to the wrong meetings," he said. I backed a step, fingers tight around the case. "You're a long way from the archives." He shrugged. "I go where the paperwork goes." He lifted his hand. In it, a badge flashed briefly. Port Authority, or something close enough to fool a judge in a hurry. "You want that case," he said. "I want answers." "You can't afford answers," he said. "They cost more than money." Behind him, the fog breathed. Another shape moved, lower, limping like it was carrying pain in one leg. A voice came from the dark, strained but familiar. "Billy, don't give it to him." My pulse hit my throat. "Eddie." He stepped forward just enough for the light to catch the side of his face. older, harder, a fresh cut across his brow. Eyes still the same, sharp, tired, full of crimes he'd never confessed. "You're supposed to be dead," I said. "I tried," he answered. "The city wouldn't let me." The ash suit man smiled wider. Touching reunion. Eddie's hand was inside his coat, not casual, ready. "He's not Port Authority," Eddie said. "He's the Port Authority, and half your department besides." The ash suit man's voice stayed calm. "You were always a problem, Rourke, even when you burned." Eddie's jaw tightened. "That fire was your signature. I just refused to stay signed." The air between them felt charged, like the moment before lightning decides who to punish. I looked from one to the other, the case heavy in my hand, and understood the ugly math. This was never about truth. This was about who gets to write it. Eddie met my eyes. "When I tell you," he said, "run." The ash suit man lifted his gun. Eddie moved first. The pier erupted in sound, shots cracking, wood splintering, fog swallowing the flashes like it was hungry. I dropped to my knees, case clutched to my chest, and crawled toward the side ladder that led down to the waterline. A bullet tore through the boards inches from my hand. Eddie shouted my name, not a warning, an order. I ran. I didn't look back until I hit the street, lungs burning, rain on my face, the case still intact. In the distance, the harbor lights flickered through fog like dying stars. Somewhere on Pier 17, two men settled an argument the city had been funding for years. I opened the case in my car with shaking hands. Inside was a single file sealed in plastic. On the front page, stamped in red, were 3 words that made my blood turn cold. Internal Affairs Unit. And underneath, a list of names. Badges I'd saluted, hands I'd shaken, men I'd trusted. At the bottom of the page was one name circled twice. Mine.